Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 193 based on novel. So let's start. Hermit Qin Mu understood and changed into a ray of bright light that left. Only Qin Mu was then alone in the sacred hall. The rune markings on the walls instantly lit up, and his body changed against his will, turning him into a red-haired god with a snake's body. After a long time, Qin Mu dispersed the god form and left the sacred hall. He went to another star and entered another palace hall, observing the rune markings there. After a dozen days, he finally walked finished with all 5 stars and went to 6 directions divine treasure. He spent a dozen days more there before entering 7 stars divine treasure. Many more days passed. After that, he couldn't proceed anymore since celestial being divine treasure and life and death divine treasure had no one to host them. When Qin Mu walked out of Hall of 3 Eons looking a little haggard and with a stubby beard, Hermit Qin Mu knew that the youth had not been sleeping the whole time. He felt slightly pained for him and asked, "Has human Emperor Qin found what he wanted?" Qin Mu was in good spirits. The improvement in his 5 elements, 6 directions, and 7 stars divine treasures had given him a lot, renewing his confidence. He gave his thanks. "Much thanks, Immortal. As for whether I found what I wanted, I still need to confirm it. May I ask, comparing the founder of Little Jade Capital to first ancestor human emperor of Hall of Human Emperors, whose abilities were better?" "I can't really say whose abilities were stronger, since both of them are seniors, who had become true gods 20,000 years ago, and I've never seen them fight before. However, Little Jade Capital has a few old scrolls that speak about the ancestor once going to find the first generation human emperor. He had wanted to make him leave a mountain, but he returned in low spirits from a defeat, and had to nurse his injuries for several months. The scroll stated that the first-generation human emperor had used immense magic power to move the fragment of founding Emperor Celestial Heavens, and that his abilities were extremely strong. Hall of Human Emperors is 100 times bigger than Little Jade Capital, and is known to be terrifying. I think that the ancestors of Little Jade Capital had all went out of their way to protect themselves, while the first-generation human emperor had brought countless people from various races to battlefields all the time. From that, it's not that hard to make a guess whose abilities were stronger." Qin Mu's face turned ashen. After a long time, he bowed. "I understand, much thanks, Immortal." Hermit Qin Mu frowned and felt that the youth's state of mind was even worse than when he had come. "You haven't been sleeping for a month and more, so you should take a rest first." Qin Mu agreed. Hermit Qin Mu arranged a room for him and let him sleep. Qin Mu woke up after a dozen more days, but his complexion still wasn't good. He insisted on leaving, and Hermit Qin Mu didn't keep him back any longer. "If Saint Woodcutter comes back, where do I go to inform you? I'll have to trouble Immortal to go to Border Dragon City. I might be there." Hermit Qin Mu saw him off while thinking in bewilderment. Back when human Emperor Qin came here for the first time, he was so full of metal. So why has he become so dispirited? Qin Mu sat on the chest that brought him away. He poured a full basin of scarlet fire spirit pills mixed with fire element divine vitality pill to the delighted and surprised yet nervous Dragon Qilin. "Why has Cult Master become so kind today? Is it because I starved for over a month, or is he preparing to put me on the table? No matter what, I need to eat first." After he finished the basin, Qin Mu poured him another one. The Dragon Qilin hesitated for a moment while looking down at the basin full of spirit pills. He suddenly began to cry miserably as he lowered his head to eat more. Qin Mu looked at him in bewilderment. "What are you crying for?" "It's good to die as a full ghost," the Dragon Qilin said through a full mouth while wiping his eyes. "At least I can head on my way with a full stomach." Cult Master, make it a swift one. Qin Mu shook his head and said, I've starved you these few days, so I'm paying you back. I ain't going to kill you for your meat. The dragon Qilin was delighted and ate all the spirit pills in the basin. When they passed by a city, Qin Mu stopped to buy some medicinal ingredients. He went to several cities and refined numerous scarlet fire spirit pills and fire elements divine vitality pill, which he stuffed into the chest. The dragon Qilin was ineffably moved by such actions. Cult Master is really good to me. Qin Mu bought some black iron and black gold to forge strange spirit weapons on the way. The dragon Qilin couldn't understand what he wanted to do. He only saw some of the things refined by Qin Mu were flags, some were sacrificial altars, and some were tools of calculation like 8 trigrams, THG, abacus, and 5-element talismans. After a few days, they came to board a dragon city, but did not enter it. Qin Mu used 8 trigrams platform, THG diagram, and numerous other tools of calculation to calculate while looking around his surroundings. He found the terrain and used a ruler to measure a nearby mountain. He then recorded a series of runes on a paper. The dragon Qilin went over to take a look, but he couldn't understand anything. There was no end to the calculations even when the sun was about to descend and the darkness about to come. When Qin Mu finally finished, he set up a sacrificial altar with flags all around it. He then stood upon it after chasing the dragon Qilin and the chest away. Cult Master, what is this for? The dragon Qilin asked from beside the chest. Qin Mu executed the flags and looked at the darkness in the surroundings. Another world soon appeared and overlapped with great ruins. In that world, countless devils moved around with their smoke-like bodies as they came from huge space holes. In Qin Mu's eyes, the people of the other world were fighting back against those devils. He was faced with a large-scale battlefield that was incomparably vast. Fatty dragon, I've prepared enough spirit pills to last you a long time. Just stay with the chest for a few days. I plan to. His gaze was fixated on a running devil general on the battlefield. On the sacrificial altar, countless runes lit up, and the teleportation flags rustled. Go to another world. Boom. A loud explosion rang out, and Qin Mu and the teleportation flags instantly vanished. Instead, on the sacrificial altar, a devil general that was tall and sturdy suddenly appeared and looked around in a daze. Toot, toot. The sound of the bugle horn was long, and countless flags fluttered, swirling to form a huge circle. Qin Mu suddenly appeared in the middle of a vast battlefield where countless soldiers of the devil army were rushing forward. They swept him along in their charge. In front of them was an incomparably majestic city, with huge ships flying in the sky. Gods stood upright, there with divine weapons in their hands and swept up countless soldiers and horses with each strike. Qin Mu had used the spell of sacrifice and teleportation formation to come to the world of the girl in the darkness. The dragon Qilin was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. Qin Mu had used the method of sacrifice to turn himself into a sacrificial offering. Like that, he transferred himself to another world while his existence was replaced by a devil general of another world to maintain the balance of the two worlds. Has Cult Master's calculations reached such a profound level already? How did he calculate that? The dragon Qilin stared with his eyes wide open. After following the young patriarch for many years, he also had extremely high attainments in calculations. If it wasn't because he was lazy, he would have certainly become one of the top-notch calculation experts in the world. However, the technique of calculation Qin Mu had used baffled even him. He knew the theory, but when thinking about how to execute it, his mind was a blank sheet of paper. The method of sacrifice transformed blood and flesh into energy, transferring them into another world to replace the life form in the other world. However, Qin Mu didn't change himself into energy, but transferred himself in a complete state to the other world. There were too many considerations required for that, which surpassed the dragon Qilin's scope and horizons. Qin Mu not only used calculation, but also included Juqian Devil King's method of sacrifice, as well as the methods of space measurement, teleportation. All of that required unbelievable amounts of knowledge. Only part of what he did would be more than enough for numerous divine arts practitioners to study for life. Cult Master used himself as a sacrificial offering to transfer himself to another world this time, but how is he coming back? The Dragon Qilin immediately thought of the crux of the matter, and looked at the Devil General, who was still in a daze. He then immediately shouted out, "Stand there and don't move." The Devil General was still confused at what had just happened. He was clearly rushing forward earlier, but it was cleared not through this place. He lowered his head and saw a monster that looked like a hybrid between a pig and dragon covered in scales and an even stranger chest. It was the unbelievably fat monster that had spoken. The Devil General looked around himself, noting the incomparably intense darkness. He muttered, "Yikuha-ei, what is this place?" The Dragon Qilin lifted the chest up and threw it at that Devil General. The creature gave a cold snort and raised his hands to grab the projectile. The next moment, however, the chest opened up and swallowed him with a gulp. Bang! The chest landed on the sacrificial altar with the Devil General overturning seas and rivers inside it. He made the chest stagger left and right from the beatings, jumping up and down irregularly. The moment the Dragon Qilin threw the chest out, he had risen into the air. When the chest landed, he landed on its top, pressing down on it. The Devil General in the chest was extremely strong and nearly blew him off still. He hurriedly said, "We can't let him out. No matter what, we can't let him out. We have to keep him around so that when Cult Master wants to come back, he can sacrifice him again. But the spirit pills that Cult Master left for me can't last too long. Wait a minute, my spirit pills are all in the chest." The Dragon Qilin let out a miserable cry. The voice of a bugle horn became more and more resounding as though the instrument was blown beside Qin Mu's ears, nearly deafening him. He turned back to take a look, and violent air current flooded over. The sound wave suppressed it, making his skin ripple. Behind him were long elephant tusks that were over 30 yards long and filled with steel knives. 3 huge elephants that had devil markings all over its body was pulling a cloud chariot. Its tusks swung left and right, impaling over a dozen devils on the steel knives. Once caught, those people could only flail about with the swinging motion. On the cloud chariot was a horn of a strange beast that was even longer than the elephant's tusks. It had been hollowed out and turned into a bugle horn, at whose end 2, or even 3 men could stand. A deafening sound came from that bugle horn. On the chariot, a devil giant roused his vital chi to blow the bugle horn. The sound was so loud that it spread throughout the entire battlefield. The incomparably huge cloud chariot disregarded friend and foe, crushing everything in its way with the huge elephant and wheels. They crushed so many devils that were rushing forward that blood and flesh were splattered everywhere. Qin Mu's surroundings were filled with devils clad in black armor swinging their weapons. Without much thought, he began to sprint frantically in the same direction, toward the battlefield. "A Pugao Nen Ham, who are you?" A devil immediately realized that Qin Mu wasn't one of them and gave him a puzzled look. The next moment, his head flew up high. The sword pellet flew out from Qin Mu's Daotai sack and into his hand. It hummed there, and countless swords rushed out from the 2 sides of his fist. They created an illusion of a double-edged longsword. Both sides were pointy, and the blade was 40 yards long. Qin Mu rotated his sword in a circle, and swept it in all directions. All of the devil soldiers pouncing over instantly turned into limbs flying in the sky. The huge elephant that ran toward him also had its front feet severed and crashed headlong into the ground, snapping its tusks. Behind, the huge cloud chariot rose into mid-air, and flipped over as it flew over Qin Mu's head. The devil giant on the chariot watched him while standing upside down. When he saw Qin Mu, his eyes widened in astonishment. Next, a sword stabbed his head and nailed him to the chariot. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief after he settled the danger of being trampled by the huge elephant and the cloud chariot. He looked back, and his scalp couldn't help crawling. Behind him were countless huge elephants pulling cloud chariots driven by devils toward the battlefield on the opposite side. The noise from the heavy feet landing repeatedly on the ground was like thunder rumbling across the battlefield. Behind the huge cloud chariots, there were numerous strange beasts that were even larger than the huge elephants. They sprinted frantically, with fierce-looking devil gods standing on their backs, with devil god weapons in their hands. Those weapons exploded with terrifying power and swept through the sky of the battlefield, humming as they went straight for the gods on the opposite side. Magnificent and dazzling yet abnormally terrifying ripples wreaked havoc in the sky above the battlefield. The power of the gods and devils' weapons collided and warped space. All kinds of lights danced in the sky, world-shaking blades of color sweeping to and fro in the sky. Ripples spread in all directions, promising sure death for those flying. Qin Mu quickly determined his situation, and his expression became grim. The place he was at was right in front of the devil army. The soldiers located at this position were obviously the lowest cannon fodder, expendables used to rush the enemy's base and test its defense. Since Qin Mu was located among the expendables and about to clash with the enemy's people, there was a high chance he'd become an expendable too. A Pugao Nen Han. A shouted question came from the cloud chariot in the back as numerous devil giants looked at him in suspicion. THG Lu, one of you? Qin Mu immediately shouted back at them. Countless devil soldiers jumped out of the cloud chariots, but unlike before, they were the elites of the devil race. They swarmed in like a flood, rushing at him frantically while shouting, "Ha Tila, kill!" Qin Mu no longer hesitated and turned to run. He was confused though. I said that I was one of them, so why do they still want to kill me? The elites were not the lowly devils that were rushing forward as the vanguard. These people had powerful abilities and belonged to the heavenly devil horde. Qin Mu had once fought with it in the living realm of the dead, and so knew that their abilities were indeed astonishing. Heavenly devil horde was hidden behind the cloud chariot, and would only attack after the lowly devils in the vanguard had barged into the battle formation of the enemy and scattered them. At this moment, countless people from heavenly devil horde went chasing after Qin Mu, planning to get rid of this human divine arts practitioners that had appeared from God alone knew where. Shouts came from the back, and the lowly devils received the order to attack Qin Mu, who was running away as well. There was an extremely high number of lowly devils, and they swarmed over like a black flood, drowning Qin Mu out. 8,000 swords, he shouted out furiously, and the huge sword in his hand suddenly burst forth. Countless sword lights swirled frantically, and the vanguard was instantly sliced into chunks of flesh. The 8,000 swords were like a huge ball of light that rolled around the vanguard, mincing everything in its path. Whoosh! The rolling ball of light crushed the horde until a strong practitioner of celestial being realm among the lowly devils roared angrily. His body expanded, his bulging muscles bursting apart his clothes and armor. He grew to over 30 yards tall, and swept his huge mace in all directions to get rid of the lowly devils in his way. His mace was forged using secret techniques, and could be separated into 36 sections. They were interlocked and spun rapidly in different directions, slicing his own people into pieces. That devil officer swept everyone away, and raised his huge mace over Qin Mu. He could hear endless clinks as the 8,000 swords gathered rapidly to form a huge shield, blocking his attack. The body of the devil officer swayed, and 2 bangs rang out as 2 more arms popped out from under his armpits. They caught the huge shield in place while his other two hands raised the mace high up to smash down once more. Qin Mu transformed into Saturn's sovereign. Behind him, Gate of Heaven Influence, which was dozens of yards tall, appeared and opened up. The gate protected his back by taking the souls of all the devils rushing at his back into Yudu. Boom. He raised his hands and sent his palm against the devil officer. Both of their magic powers burst forth along with their divine arts. Before the mace of the devil officer could even land, his body was blown into the air by Qin Mu and sent into a bunch of devils. Some of those lowly beings died straight away. But by then, the fastest of heavenly devil horde had already reached them. A knife pellet flew through the sky, heading straight for Qin Mu's face. That knife pellet spun frantically, and countless devil knives flew out, slashing at him frantically. Heavenly Spirit's escarpment. Qin Mu shouted out, and his hands pushed forward. Chancellor Ba Shan's Heavenly Spirit's escarpment was easily executed, and stars spread out like chess pieces. Sun, moon, and the 5-element stars were the main 7 stars. They were the biggest and transformed into a light screen, which caught the curved blades in the air. Next, Heavenly Spirit escarpment suddenly shattered. Qin Mu gave a dull grunt and stumbled backward. The first person from Heavenly Devil Horde who had rushed over was a handsome youth of the Azura race among the 8 divisions of the Heavenly Devil. He stretched his hands out, and countless curved knives flew over to form a knife pellet in his hand. The Azura swung his hand, and his knife pellet rang as it formed 2 long knives. At the same time, the other curved knives in the knife pellet became incomparably fine, and flew out through the gaps of his fingers like flowing sand to swirl around him. The Azura raised the curved knives in his hands and attacked Qin Mu like a whirlwind. Clang! The 2 of them clashed, and Qin Mu moved to shake off the strength of a blow. What strength! The Azura was also blown back. He took a fraction of a moment to compose himself, then rushed toward Qin Mu at an even faster speed. Qin Mu took a step and pushed forward with a palm. The light in front of him wavered, and his vital chi transformed into a fixed word. The Azura's body froze for a moment. When he was about to move again though, Qin Mu's sword swept across him, and a heart flew into the sky. Even though you're very strong, you're still slightly inferior to me. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes as even more Heavenly Devil Horde people came to his side. Every one of them was no inferior to the Azura, which made his scalp crawl. At that moment, however, a world-shaking bang came from the battlefield. It was the collision of the 2 armies. In an instant, flesh and blood flew into the air. The sky suddenly turned dark, and in the center of the battlefield, a sacrificial altar rose through the gore. The rising land threw Qin Mu and the Heavenly Devil Horde soldiers away. Qin Mu looked over in a hurry, and his heart couldn't help leaping in shock. That sacrificial altar was used for blood sacrifice, and was quite similar to the one he had made to teleport himself to this world. The main use of the giant altar was clearly to use the flesh and blood in the battle as sacrifices for a powerful existence from another world. This sacrificial altar is hundreds of times larger than the one I made. Who could have buried it here? When he landed on the ground, he was drowned out by the Heavenly Devil Horde before he had time to think more. The sacrificial altar at that moment lit up, and countless runes swirled on its sides, shining in all directions. Blood light streaked across the sky, rushing up to blow a hole through the clouds. Boom! A huge axe descended from the sky, followed by a gorgeous and fierce tiger. Its body was surrounded with all kinds of gorgeous divine markings. My lord! The fierce tiger roared, and a familiar figure appeared on its back. Qin Mu looked at it with a blank expression. Because of his distraction, he was almost gutted by the Heavenly Devil Horde. On the sacrificial altar, he had seen a familiar person holding an axe while riding the divine tiger. It was Saint Woodcutter, who had imparted his teachings on the rock. Why would Saint Woodcutter appear here? The sacrificial altar he used seemed to have been long prepared. So could it be that the people of this world were the ones who had summoned him? Qin Mu's mind was blown. The sacrificial altar had been buried right in the center of the battlefield, so when the two armies clashed, flesh and blood activated it, summoning Saint Woodcutter. It was evident that this had been long prepared. Qin Mu immediately remembered Hermit Qing Yu's saying about Saint Woodcutter reviving a month ago and leaving with his axe. Saint Woodcutter had to have received some news, which was why he woke up from his slumber to use a sacrificial ceremony to descend to this world. Qin Mu blocked the opponent's attack from behind him, and Gate of Heaven influence suddenly grew bigger. His body spun, and Gate of Heaven influence also swelled after, instantly sending many souls to Yudu before they could even grunt. Whoosh! The tiger god that was carrying Saint Woodcutter jumped off the sacrificial altar and headed straight for the enemy camp. He looked at Qin Mu with astonishment, and a world-shaking voice rumbled. "My lord, that looks like your younger generation." From the tiger's back, Saint Woodcutter looked back and saw Qin Mu fighting the heavenly devil horde with the Gate of Heaven influence. His gaze was bright, and he lighted up the whole area around the sacrificial altar. Weird, how did he come to Supreme Emperor Heaven? Saint Woodcutter looked away. Wherever the tiger god passed, devils and horses were thrown aside. When the tiger god roared, sound waves burst forth, sending countless devils into the air. When Qin Mu saw this sight, the dragon Chilin's oversized tummy flashed through his mind. He couldn't help envying Saint Woodcutter. This tiger god refers to him as his lord, so he should be his mount. He's truly majestic. On the tiger's back, Saint Woodcutter raised the axe in his hand and split apart Devil God's divine arts that were flying at him. With a few ups and downs, the tiger god carried him into the enemy camp. From the time the tiger god leaped down the sacrificial altar to when he reached the enemy camp was only a matter of a few breaths. Saint Woodcutter raised his huge axe, and with a raise and a fall of his hand, the four heads of a four-headed devil god in the camp flew off before he could even get up. Ha-ti-la! Devil gods rushed over and circled the tiger god. Saint Woodcutter, who sat on its back, raised his huge axe. Its light surged forth like a flood. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures. No, what he executed should be the complete Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. Qin Mu was forced back continuously by the heavenly devil horde and had to move up the altar. While doing so, he'd noticed Saint Woodcutter's attack just then from the corner of his eye. His comprehension of Overlord Body 3 elixir technique far surpasses mine. Saint Woodcutter wasn't only swinging his axe. His other hand was executing all kinds of divine arts from great educational heavenly devil scriptures. However, they weren't just single arts, but were combinations of different ones, just like Li Qianxing's great overarching heavenly stars palm force. After mastering hundreds of divine arts via comprehensive study, he matched them into a kind of divine art. If it were others, they wouldn't have been able to see that his divine art was even great educational heavenly devil scriptures. However, as heavenly devil cult master, Qin Mu immediately recognized it. Around Saint Woodcutter, all kinds of strange force fields burst forth and blew the devil gods away. At that instant, a huge axe suddenly went to them and cut off their heads. The strength of its battle power was extremely terrifying. Qin Mu wanted to observe Saint Woodcutter's divine arts in detail, but more and more of the heavenly devil horde surrounded him. After Saint Woodcutter had been summoned, he went for the head of the enemy and entered the camp to kill devil gods. He ignored the rest of the heavenly devil army, so countless devils were still flooding into the battlefield and killing the enemies. At this moment, even more heavenly devil horde flooded over, but the divine arts practitioners behind the sacrificial altar were also pushing forward. The noise of the battle was world-shaking. In this kind of large-scale divine arts battle, the power of one man was insignificant. If a person got distracted, they could die under the enemy's attack at any moment. Qin Mu couldn't waste any more time and abandoned all considerations to just fight with all he had. The abilities of Heavenly Devil Horde were strangely powerful. The techniques and divine arts of the devils and eternal peace were poles apart. The former may be lacking in intricateness of the moves, but they were outstanding in their magic power. Heavenly Devil Horde had its extraordinary points there. Their corporeal bodies were different from those of the human race. Their 8 divisions were as such: fish-scaled webbed frogs, magma giants, beautiful youths, ugly women, scorpion-tailed ladies, 8-clawed women, 8 tentacled mutants, and snake-handed mutants. These devils had a higher bloodline, and were natural fighting machines that had extremely strong battle power. The ones around Qin Mu were the elites, and not one was any weaker than him. More and more Heavenly Devil Horde rushed up the sacrificial altar, and there were as many as 10 people. They saw that the gate of heaven influence behind Qin Mu was incomparably strange, and avoided it while working together to attack. Qin Mu fought against them with all his strength, and the 8,000 swords shuttled back and forth. Countless sword lights flooded in when the flying swords scattered like locusts. In a split second, mountains and rivers appeared, forming sword-treading mountains and rivers. On the sacrificial altar, mountains stretched endlessly, waterfalls fell, and long rivers flowed. The terrifying fights earlier had vanished without a trace. Yet the next moment, blood flowed out from this picture of mountains and rivers, dyeing the mountains and rivers red. They then crumbled, and a magma giant swung a huge hammer, after raising from the shattered mountains and rivers. Qin Mu retreated and raised his hands up high. Carefree Sword flew over, and the other 8,000 swords rushed over. In the blink of an eye, they all merged into Carefree Sword. The magma giant smashed down with a hammer, and terrifying air currents rushed in all directions, sweeping countless corpses around the sacrificial altars into the air. Qin Mu held his sword in both hands against that magma giant's hammer that spun as fast as the wind. Only a clink was heard when they collided, but Qin Mu trembled violently as he got sent into midair. At that moment, the magma giant was sliced into 2 along with his hammer. Before Qin Mu even landed on the ground, he saw an 8-clawed woman opening her claws wide. The corpses in midair were blasted apart, and the blood covered the surroundings, drowning the youth. Qin Mu swung Carefree Sword, and it separated. 8,000 swords combined to form 2 long knives which crossed each other. Knife lights created something akin to a moon in the sky. The moonlit knife lights merged into one and suddenly exploded. Rays of light shot down like meteors. Swoosh! The blood fog was cut, and the 8-clawed woman saw starlight. Her claws tapped it, and sounds of collision rang out. Moonlight and starlight penetrated her body, dismembering her. The 6th form of butcher's pig slaughtering knife skills. The long knife hangs below the moonlight. Among the stars the heavenly horses are startled. Qin Mu loosened his grip on the sword, and the 2 long knives flew up to separate into countless flying swords that circled around him to block the thousands of devil knives coming at him. Flipping his hand to strike out with a mudra, the knife-skilled devil expert that was attacking Runt before exploding into pieces. Boom, boom, boom. Thunder rumbled and exploded over 10 miles. Wherever Qin Mu's yin-yang heaven-flipping hands passed, people and horses were overturned. With another mudra from his main hand, the ice froze the land for over 10 miles. An index finger tapped on the heart of brows, and the flying swords followed the path of yin-yang heaven-flipping hands to spiral forward and make blood to flow like the river. Spiral sword form. Suddenly, 2 huge pythons coiled around Qin Mu and twisted crazily. A snake woman had jumped into the air and bound him with her arms, which were snakes. Qin Mu raised his head, and 2 rays shot out from his eyes. Holes opened up in the chest of the snake woman, killing her, but the snake arms still brought him to mid-air as well. Below him, an ugly woman suddenly slammed the calabash behind her, and its mouth opened. With a whoosh, blood-colored devil chi spewed out, and went straight for Qin Mu. True dragon overlord body. Qin Mu shouted out furiously, and broke free of the snake arms. With a mudra, the apparition of a volcano suddenly appeared behind him. It stood tall as it suddenly erupted. Magnetic raging inferno palm. He smacking his palm in the direction below himself, and the blood-colored devil chi was incinerated along with the ugly woman. Superb divine art. Among the divine arts practitioners of Seven Stars realm, you can place in the top 10. Qin Mu was astonished when he heard the stiff voice. He looked down and saw a great general of heavenly devil horde running up the sacrificial altar with his head raised to look at him. That heavenly devil great general had huge flags behind his back. While rushing up, his body suddenly shook, and 4 heads, as well as 8 arms, popped out. He held long knives which crossed each other. His footsteps changed unpredictably, as he killed all the divine arts practitioners on his way. Primordial spirit projection. The heavenly devil great general smacked the back of his knife against his head, and a primordial spirit that was 30 yards tall leaped out from his body. It roared toward the sky and raised its hand to blast a mudra at Qin Mu. It was almost half a field wide, with markings coiling around one another within it and displaying all kinds of devil markings that were glowing bright before dimming at intervals. Devil markings danced, but before they even came to Qin Mu's sides, devil runes that looked like chains appeared around him to bind him. Yet he definitely couldn't receive the power of that palm. Carefree sword and the other flying swords were flying back, but they were too far away to save him. At that moment, Qin Mu saw that Saint Woodcutter's 5 fingers come together, and all kinds of divine arts from great educational heavenly devil scriptures merge into one. Their power burst forth and blew a devil god into pieces. Inspiration struck Qin Mu, and he also put all his 5 fingers together. His overlord body 3 elixir technique instantly circulated in a strange pattern. His spirit embryo and soul merged together, the 5 elements shone brightly, the 6 directions became one, 7 stars rose into the sky, and the sun and moon rotated. Bang, bang, bang. Boundless energy flooded out from Qin Mu's body, and snapped the devil marking chains around him. He then raised his hand to welcome the fierce palm from the heavenly devil great general's primordial spirit. Qin Mu grunted and bounced up high into the sky where countless divine arts, as well as weapons of the gods and devils, were wreaking havoc. If he went any higher, he would definitely die miserably. Countless runes appeared around his body and swirled around him. Just as Qin Mu was about to fly into the forbidden area in the sky, he vanished. Bang! He fell over 10 miles away. The terrifying palm force from the heavenly devil great general's primordial spirit had made him tumble and crash into a bunch of divine arts practitioners that were rushing forward. Qin Mu tumbled dozens of times before stabilizing himself. Countless divine arts practitioners rushed past him. Soon after, they raised all kinds of spirit weapons into the air before sending them to the ground diagonally like rain, completely covering the land before themselves. It was hard to say how many devils had died from that avalanche of spirit weapons. I'm still alive. Qin Mu hurriedly checked his body and discovered that even though he was covered in injuries, the sure-kill attack from that heavenly devil great general had not injured him. He couldn't help being surprised and delighted. That move of Saint Woodcutter has unbelievable power. Could he have known I was in trouble and purposely executed this move for me to learn and survive that sure death situation? He stretched his hand out to grab emptiness. Carefree sword brought the other flying swords back, before they changed back into a sword pellet in his palm. Suddenly, a crisp voice came from behind him. I seem to have seen you before. Qin Mu turned back and saw a towering god behind him. On its shoulder was a girl with 2 braids. Her head was tilted as she examined him. This video will end here.